in the way we apply for jobs post-medical school, and also a change in the emphasis when applying for jobs in a bit to make it more objective and to give everybody sort of a level playing field. It's pretty much de-emphasized the need to write a CV, because it felt like the requirements to do an F1 job were very generic. And so this has got de-emphasized over the years, not at any fault of anybody, but unfortunately it is still very, very relevant because there's life after F2. And a lot of you are going to be interfacing with a medical career in different ways, in different shapes or form. Now, a CV is a paper, or nowadays, sort of on-screen version of you without actually meeting you. So you want to put your best foot forward. You want to show yourself to a potential recruiter, to anybody else that you are looking to present your CV to, that you're as good as you say you are. But what's also very important in doing that is to know who your potential recruiter is and what they would like to hear, and present bits of you that are most attractive to them. Because the process of screening through CVs can be time consuming. It can involve a lot of candidates. You might have to screen through lots of CVs in a short space of time. And you really just want to be able to quickly pick out what's relevant. And quite often, a lot of candidates, really good candidates, are missed because they've got CVs that the presentation doesn't really appeal to recruiter or doesn't point out the important points very clearly. Now, one other aspect of writing a CV, which me and Ray and I have had discussions about during our meetings, is about a guide to career development. It pretty much serves as a roadmap into where you want to go. Now, I know a lot of you might have not decided what you want your medical careers to shape out like, while some of you already have an idea. What you might actually find as you go through that process is that you go through a process of knowing what you like and knowing what you're unlikely to ever do. And you find that you have a cluster of specialties that are pretty much in line with what you might want to do. And they will share a few things, they share a few attributes together. And putting on your CV gives you a visual representation of where you want to go. And it might actually help you to emphasize and guide your developmental planning towards aspects of areas in your CV you think might actually put you in good stead to getting where you want to go. And please don't think the process will start in an F2 year. It pretty much starts now. This is the time to write your CV. You're not applying for a job, but you're actually trying to be the doctor you want to be, the specialty doctor you want to be, and you want to be prepared. Now, to be honest, it doesn't take a lot. It's all about being organized. And I've had conversations with many of you, and you kind of, the first feeling is that, isn't this premature? Shouldn't I focus on my medical exams? Shouldn't I focus on just passing medical school? But you soon come to start to realize as you get through medical school and start to practice medicine, being organized makes you look very, very good. It comes across as being very good. And writing a CV is a personal organizational tool to get into where you want to go. So how do you prepare? So the first thing is understanding yourself. The first thing is understanding yourself. Requirements of a potential job or career goal, or what you would like to be. And when I say understanding yourself, is where do you see yourself in terms of, even if you're not really sure what career you want to do in terms of specialty, you might have an idea whether you want to be in a hospital or not be in a hospital, or you might have an idea whether you just want to be an academic, you want to be a researcher, but you just don't know where. Like I say to some of my medical students, you might just realize that you're quite an interventional person and you're interested in a part of medicine that is heavily interventional. That's part of understanding you and your career goal. while some of you, very specifically, you actually know where you want to go, which is fine, which helps in terms of designing your CV. The next step is to compile everything. And what I'd say at this stage, reason why it's quite good for you to write your CV at this stage is anything that comes to your mind, put it down. Write it down, put it on a piece of paper. Anything that you've done, you've volunteered somewhere, you have helped out somewhere, you've done some work that you feel it's probably not important, just write it down. Everything that you think that you've done. And this process of compilation is probably going to take a while. Hence why it's good to do it now, not when you've got a week to submit a CV and then you're trying to scuffle down what you've done. Because now you've got time, you can think, you can put things down. Now see this process as a cyclical process because you can go over and over and over it again. And as soon as you start to remember things, to put it down. Now the process of writing your CV is a third component, which is selecting what's pertinent. And that statement is a dynamic statement. You don't select what's pertinent once. You might be applying for 3 jobs, and what's pertinent to the 3 of them is very different. So you might want to organize your information into what's pertinent for each job. So you might have 3 types of CVs for 3 different types of jobs. Now, you need to be able to convey the information in a very concise form, and at the same time provide enough detail. Gives enough information to whoever's looking at it that you have that skill or you're conveying the right information. Now, the last part of review and revise is the thing that loops this process in the sense that if you've written your rough CV now and it looks like, oh, there's so much on it, as you move ahead in your career, as you move ahead through medical school, through your foundation years, you'd review and revise that information. You take bits out, you put things in. As you have a CV, once you have a CV, you know where you want to go. It will make you actually visually appreciate what you need to do to add to that CV to make it better. And you'd start to do that. And over time, you review and revise your CV. And you'd find that by the time you finish your F2 year, you have a really strong CV. And if you're using that CV to apply for a job or to fill a form, an application form, an online application form, it would help you to fill most of the components of that form very easily. And also over time, you would have had a really, really good grasp and understanding of where your strengths are and be able to highlight that really positively. I have a CV, even though I'm in a job that I'm not looking for work, but I use it for my personal development, and it's really important. And I still get people ask me for my CV for different things, doing research, helping to advise on things, reviewing papers, or advising organizations. They would ask for your CV, and so it is a useful exercise. It's a lifelong exercise throughout your career that you're just going to continue to develop, refine, and improve on. So how do you understand the job requirements? So let's take, for instance, you're all going into foundation and your end goal is to finish foundation, and some of you would want to go straight into specialty training. Some people might want to take a gap year. Some people might want to do other things. Irrespective of what you want to do, you need to have your end goal as your focus. And what I advise, once you've kind of appreciated where you want to go, is understand the requirements of the job. What's the person specification like? Now, the other source of information is from specialty mentors. And when I talk to some of you, I say, especially those who have decided what they want to do, it's really important to align and form a professional relationship with a specialty mentor. It goes a long way. They give you hints and tips of what to do to kind of get you through into the specialty much easier. It's especially true of the really small specialties where nationally they all know each other. So, coming into the group, knowing one person, you pretty much almost know everybody. Attending career events specific to the specialty might help because you get hints and other opportunities to get involved in projects that will help you towards getting your specialty. Now, the other thing that a lot of people do, and I certainly did this, is mirroring the career of someone who is ahead of you, who you think actually you want to aspire towards. When I was doing my specialty training, that was something that I did, because I actually saw someone in a role that I felt was something I wanted to do, and hence I tried to mirror the career. Obviously, you talk to them and have a conversation, have an idea of how the career path has gone, and then use that as a guide, because no one doctor has the same path, but use that as a guide to get you through the specialty. And they would give you a lot of advice as to what specifically to do to try and get into the specialty. Now, the other thing about is to have a grounded understanding of the details of the job. And I conduct interviews for academic clinical lecturers, and I review application forms, and you would know who has done their homework and who hasn't. And you can't do this in a month. It takes a while. You know, the things you do from now in medical school make you grounded in a specialty once you know what you want to do. Things like your SECs, intercalation electives, or taster session foundation program can help you to ground yourself in that specialty. You know details that people who go on the internet and search about a specialty wouldn't know, because you've got a firm, tenacious relationship with the specialty. This is especially true of those specialties that are really, really competitive, which is just the nature of medicine. So the structure and style. There are some principles in the structure and style. I'm not going to give you a model CV. I'm not going to tell you this is an idea of a CV, because what's going to happen, and I've fallen foul of this, is that you'll just copy it verbatim, because actually your CV is individual to you. Haven't read a lot of CVs. I know the CVs are written by someone, or CVs that have been copied out from a different style. But there's some clear principles. Make it clear and concise. Having understood the person's specs, make it easy to pick out the important qualities, the essential and the desirable skills and attributes in the person's specs that you think you want to highlight. Use good grammar. Having grammatical errors is a no-no. And take away any jargon. Don't use any jargon. And overall, it has to be neutral. Don't use flash colors and you know, distracting fonts, double-spaced paragraphing, and a reasonable font. And I'd say a minimum of a 12-point font would be ideal. So what I've kind of done is tried to give it a skeletal structure of what a CV would look like, and kind of fill in the gaps, and then kind of get you guys to kind of have an idea of what it is. But like I said, it can be modified. So that, you know, this is what's at the top. There's the top of it, which is very, very standard for most people. It can be designed in any way. You want your full name, your contact details. But other details as necessary. So some of those details don't have to be there, but they are relevant in certain places. For instance, you finish your F2 job and you decide you want to spend a year in abroad doing working somewhere. Things like your nationality and professional registration come into play. Or, you know, your medical indemnity and what type of registration you have actually also do come into play, especially if you are going outside the main structure of training. So you might adapt that depending on what kind of CV you're writing and to what job. Now, the next thing is a brief personal statement. And there are two schools of thought to this. Some people say, yeah, it's really good. It's a summary of what your CV is like. And some people say it's distracting. You know, if you write a personal statement that's not good, some people will stop there and won't continue, and then they would have missed out bits in your CV, so don't put it. I think it's a nice thing to do. I personally think it's a good summary, as long as you write it really well. If you're struggling to put down a really good personal statement, and take it out. It basically tells a person in summary, who are you? I'm a medical student, or I'm an F2 doctor, or I'm an F3 doctor. I'm currently working in X, Y, and Z. I hope to work as a specialist in forensic pathology, and I'd like to also get involved in research, and I'm hoping this, and so, you know, you've put that kind of brief statement in a bit to kind of maybe align towards the job application. Because if, for instance, you're applying for a job in say general surgery, and you've said your future goal is to be a forensic psychiatrist, you've kind of just missed the boat. Most people just stop there, won't read your CV, and move on. So it's got to be aligned to what you want to do. Educational qualifications. Now, I've read a few of your CVs, and this can be, at your stage, a lot of you put all your GCSEs, A levels, and then you finish your medical schools. Now, I think that's appropriate for your stage, but as you move on, certain things are standard. Is a given. You wouldn't have made it into medical school if you didn't have the right A levels or any other prerequisite. So beyond medical school, your medical degree is enough. That's your undergraduate degree. It's the base degree. It's the base essential qualification. And as you go into postgraduate medicine, you start to add postgraduate qualifications. Now, you might be thinking about this in terms of, may I have done a master's or a PhD, but it also includes other things, other qualifications you might have gathered as a result of sort of involvement in work-based practices. For example, at your stage, if post you have a postgraduate diploma in medical education, or you have a teaching qualification, it is a valid postgraduate qualification to put in there, and that starts to qualify your application a lot more. Things like details under each qualifications, I would restrict to awards. If you've had distinctions and awards, I restrict it to that and not put too much detail. Now, you could put your distinction and awards under your educational qualifications, or you could put it somewhere separate. For instance, if you have a lot of it and you want to highlight it, you could create a different section for awards and distinctions and then highlight it there. Like I said, this is really very basic. The employment history and experience. As you leave medical school, you start to have an employment history. I appreciate you don't have any now, but some of you actually do already. Some of you who have done degrees and worked before coming into medical school will have an employment history and experience that you want to reflect. Now, the thing is, it's important if there are any important skills and attributes in those jobs that you've done that would show you in good light, i.e. would reflect that you're a very good fit for the job. It's good to highlight it. For instance, if, you have been a research assistant in a lab and you're applying for a research job as an academic, that's a really good experience. You've been a researcher in a lab, and whilst you're in that job, you gained X, Y, and Z skills, DNA sequencing, cell isolation, things like that. That puts you into good light. So there are things to sort of highlight in the top third of your CV. Now, it can't be too busy. It's brief and very, very to the point. Now, this is the middle section of and I call it a dynamic section of your CV, which is sort of the middle third, but it can be longer. And this is the CV that tells me this is you. This is where you're putting things down that are you. It doesn't have to have everything listed on there. It can have all of it. It can have some of it. It can have actually none of it. But I'll be honest with you, it wouldn't be a really good CV if it doesn't have any. It has to have some of it. Now, from the first third and from understanding the person's specification of the job you're going to, you would know which of these are most important to the job. And then you need to be able to show on your CV how you can demonstrate you've got those qualities. If you look at application forms, for specialty training. They've changed a lot now, but in the past they used to, some of them still have it actually. Can you give an example where you've demonstrated teamwork, where you've demonstrated teaching, where you've demonstrated, can you give me examples of where you've gotten involved in research? Those are bits that you just pull out from your CV and put in the application form, but they're also still very relevant in writing a really good CV. And like I said, these are the bits you are going to change very often, apart from your experience and your degrees as you go through medicine. But as you go through medicine, you'd find that you'll be adding and removing this very often as you add to them. Now, this part of the CV as well is the bit that you would kind of really want to focus on in your personal development. If you've just written a CV to guide your personal development, you want to be sure that this part of your CV, as relevant to the specialty you're aiming to do, is well done. If you, for instance, after this lecture today, you go and sit down and think, you know what, I'm putting down my CV, and you write it down, and you find, and you match it with the person specs of the specialty you want to do, and you find I'm lacking in most of it. This is the point where you start to think, how am I going to get things in the domains that I have nothing in? And that's the essence of writing a CV, even when you're not looking for a job, because it actually helps you to plan your development and helps you to be an organized person. Personal organization is so key in career development. So I've listed a whole list of things. Some of you might be familiar with some might not be familiar with others. Now, when I talked at the start about getting everything you've done on a piece of paper, you just want to pull it all in. This is where it counts, because you might think, I've never been a leader. I don't think I've had leadership experience, but you've been the head of your girls, of Boy Scouts or Girls Guides, and you've managed a trip somewhere and managed a group of people. That is a good example of leadership. It's also a good example of team working. You might be involved in some teaching experience for people who are keen to come to medical school, or as a clinical student for preclinical medical students, that's teaching experience. Or you might have taught resuscitation somewhere, that's teaching experience. Audit and clinical governance, you might not think about it, but a lot of you, when you go through your GP placements, you do some audit, clinical governance, organizing clinical governance meetings or audit meetings falls into that group easily. Research and publications, this is where some of you actually kind of don't have things to put down, because it's a very active process to be involved in research and publication. There's some times you can passively be involved, but this is where you have to be proactive and look for opportunities to be involved in research and publications. This is important for some specialties more than others. So, if it's a specialty you're trying to go into is something that makes that a priority, especially if you want to be an academic, then that's where you need to work. Now, like I said, with achievements and awards, if it was all in medical school and you had loads of them, you want to highlight it on the medical school, that's fine. But if you want to make it really, relevant and to show and highlight it, you could put it under achievement and awards and make it one of the top in your dynamic section of your CV. Meeting and presentations are very, very important. The marks are awarded often for this, and especially those who are trying to get into very competitive specialties and the academia. But also, it's also a very good example of how you show certain things, show public speaking, which is a very, very good quality to have as a clinician. And so you also have creating oral and poster presentations involve a degree of organization. So you come across as a very organized person, and gives a very good first impression if you had some meetings or presentations, especially if it's relevant to your specialty. And I think that's the key. It has to be relevant to what you want to do. You just don't do it for the sake of doing it, because you guys don't have time. There's a lot on your plate. So this kind of helps you to streamline and guide you to getting what is really required to have a good CV for what you want to do. I just put some person specifications up just for you guys to have a kind of show some examples. This is your F1 person specs, and you can immediately see the problem. It's very, very generic. Now, a lot of the things here are things that are keyed into the good medical practice guidelines created by the GMC for all doctors. Safety, quality, communication, maintaining trust, knowledge, skills, and performance. And these are all pre-specified, and there is a kind of assumption made straight away that by going through and completing the medical school process, you would acquire all of this. So hence why there isn't that much of attraction to do a person specs for an F1 job. The story changes if you want to do an academic F1 job, because obviously the thinking there is that you should have some you should be able to show some interest in the academia. And as you can see, there are some questions asked here, and it is deanery specific. I mean, for the East Midlands, it's very simple. Just explain why you want to apply to an academic foundation post. And if you're planning to do your academic F1 in the East Midlands, then that's all you need to focus on. But I'd advise not to. It's always good to have a plan A and a plan B. For London, you don't need to do anything. But for some other deaneries, you can see some of the things they've asked for. Have you had experience of simulation training? And what's the value of developing simulation training for doctors? And, you know, if that's where you really want to go, you kind of need to kind of start to look at that experience and see if there's any avenue to get that experience whilst you're in medical school. Give details of your special study modules or elective placement and the significance in academic career. Now that question just shows that it's trying to identify an individual who has used every tool in their medical school to align themselves positively towards what they want to do. So someone who has used their electives to kind of build towards an academic career will be able to answer that question very comfortably. So this kind of just exemplifies why you have to understand where you want to go, because it helps you to design your CV towards that target. Now, please don't be disheartened if you haven't decided what you want to do, because you can be generic as well. You can look at this generically and say, look, what are the things I want to do and what are the things I don't want to do? And loosely try to align yourself to specialties that you find attractive at the moment. The other things you could do is generically look at parts of the dynamic part of the CV that you may want to develop. And actually, I would advise, if you're being generic, having a bit of experience in each of those domains in the dynamic part of the CV is good enough, because when you now finally decide and you need to weigh in heavily on bits of it, it becomes easier rather than having to start afresh. So how do you show this? I mean, some people have talked about how you kind of demonstrate this part of the CV, and there are different ways of doing it. I'm sure you must have seen examples around. One way is to look at a specific instance where you were able to kind of demonstrate any of those qualities in a clinical or non-clinical setting. Or you describe a role where you've been able to demonstrate one of those qualities. For instance, you've been the president of a medical society, and that would help you to talk about leadership, management, team working, or you've helped organize an event in medical school, and that helps you to talk about team working, management, leadership. You can use any of that. It has to be brief, it has to be structured, and really the key words in the person specs, in fact, using some of the keywords in the person specification to describe your example does help. It does bring it forward. As an example, I've written here, some of you might have seen this, I've taken it off the internet, but I thought it was a really good example. And this is someone who's trying to talk about teamwork and how that has helped them. And this is in a bit to kind of confirm their interest in teamwork and how they can maintain that teamwork in a context of a stressful situation. Now, this answer in trying to demonstrate teamwork and demonstrate good management skills in stressful situations, which is very important in a specialty like mine, is a brilliant example. It's used an event that's happening in a non-clinical setting, part of a local club for orienteering, and conditions with challenges. So try to set the scene, very challenging conditions and require teamwork. But also he has shown leadership by saying that there's need to maintain morale. Morale is a leadership quality. To maintain morale within your team is a leadership quality, and he's quite nicely put that there, and perform effectively as a group. So he has shown teamwork, leadership, and teamwork and leadership in that statement, but also talked about being calm and rational through stressful situations, which is another quality of a good leader. And through these activities, been able to get first aid qualifications and go out to other duties and achieve bigger things. So this is an example of how you can use an instance in a non-clinical scenario to demonstrate things you've done. And what you'll find over time is that as you get involved in more activities, you go through your career, you'll be able to pick them up, you'll be able to change your examples or change your scenarios to be more reflective, to qualify more the kind of person you are and to fit you more with the job you want to do because you have a plan. And that's a key thing, to have a plan towards what you want to do. And that's the dynamic part of a CV. Now, just wanted to show you some person specs of specialties of some of you. I've just picked this at random and just to kind of show some of the things that I have talked about. Can you still see my screen? Yeah. So if you look at the basics, MBBS equivalent, that's the basics. Nobody wants to know anything.
Sorry, you mean like the PDF that you just opened?
Yeah.
No, we don't see that.
You can't see that. Okay.
Yeah.
I will. 1 second. Let me stop share and share again. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. Can you see it now? Yeah.
Yep.
So essential qualifications, MBBS equivalent. You don't need to add anything else. They don't want to know whether you've done GCSEs or A levels, whatever. It's just MBBS equivalent. And then there's some basics here. Have you been to foundation training? Yes, you've been to foundation training, and you've got all the prerequisites. Now, where it starts to get, these bits are pretty much generic. Where it starts to get really interesting is when you look at selection criteria, where they start to talk about essential and desirable criteria. And if you look at that dynamic list that I kind of explained to you, you can see clinical skills, ability to apply sound clinical judgment, and awareness to full investigation of problems. This can be assessed in application for interview. Communication skills, conceptual thinking and problem solving, empathy, sensitivity, managing others, and team involvement, which is basically team building and team membership and leadership, organization and planning, coping under pressure, which is a key skill for surgeons, which is well demonstrated in that example that I've just shown you. So if, for instance, you're an aspiring surgeon, this is something you need to look at and think, actually, I need to be able to demonstrate this comfortably in my CV. And you'd find when you now come to the point where you want to do your apply for core training, writing your application form and preparing for your interview is going to become easier. I'll show you, not everybody wants to be a, can you all see this? Oh, sorry, I think I've, let's code. Can you all see this? General internal medicine?
Yep.
Yeah, so if you look at it, so, some of you are coming out of medical school and thinking, I've got loads of time. And I mean, I was the first lot of doctors that ever did the foundation training in 2005. We were given a bag by Health Education England, which I've kept because I think one day might be worth a lot of money. But at F1, a lot of my colleagues were doing the MRCP, and I didn't understand why. I was like, what, we've just come out of medical school, we just finished finals, for God's sakes, I'm trying to, but they had a plan. And this has evolved over time. This didn't used to be there for medicine, because I did medicine initially before I went into intensive care anesthetics, but it crept in because a lot of people were doing it, and it became an essential part because actually it started to decide who, because a lot of people were applying to medicine, but it started to decide and inform who was really interested in doing medicine or not. So, that's why it's important to look at this as part of going forwards. So in terms of qualifications, this is if you have your undergraduate is MBBS, but MRCPA Part 1 would be your postgraduate in this context. But if you're looking at selection criteria, this is, you can see, is really important. For those of you who are, intercalation, you don't get any points for foundation, you do get a point for when it comes to specialty training. I can't highlight this enough. If you make a decision to intercalate because you're truly genuinely interested in a specialty, don't say because it's not going to benefit you in applying for foundation, that is, it's wasted. It's still very useful down the line. that I assess candidates for academic core training, and having an intercalated BSc or MSc with a good degree gives you points. And sometimes that's the point that decides who comes in and who doesn't. So it's still important. It's just, there's a key message I want to say. If it's part of your plan, put it in there. It might not help in the short term, but in the long term, it will be beneficial. Some prior experience. I mean, this is not required, but if, for instance, you decide to take an F3 year, for example, there's some specialties that are really, really challenging to get into. And one case in point is dermatology. And I know some people who would mentally decide, you know what, I'm going to take an F3 year and spend a year doing dermatology just to give me that added advantage when I finish core training, which is something you could do, which I know has helped a few people. So looking at this, clinical skills and knowledge, research and quality improvement skills, teaching, personal skills, problem solving, empathy and sensitivity, team working, organization and planning, vigilance and situational awareness. Now, this is something that comes with being a team leader and coping under pressure. So these are things that you would look at and look at the dynamic part of your CV and kind of look at how you're going to demonstrate it. Now, if it's a very competitive part of CV, I would advise, don't just look at the essential qualities, look at the desirable qualities as well, which are really, really important as well. You know, evidence of academic publications, academic research. This is quite important to things like medicine. I'll show you one more for anyone who's interested in the academia. So this, I should, like I said, shortlist and recruit for this post in the East Midlands. And as you can see, your intercalation is nicely there. It's a desirable qualification, but I'll be very honest with you, it feels like an essential qualification, because people who haven't done it do stand out. It's either they've done an intercalated degree, or after their degree, they've gone on to do masters and stuff. Knowledge and achievement, having an additional degree, research experience, demonstration of knowledge of the academic career pathway. And this is where being grounded, knowing your specialty, knowing, just not learning about it in the short term, but knowing about it. Prizes and distinctions, evidence of team working skills, leadership potential, and evidence of scientific publications. So if you're someone who is thinking, I want to do the academia, I want to be in the academia, this is something that you should look at and start to guide your applications towards. And you'd find at the time, it would make things a whole lot more easier. I'm just going to share my presentation again. Right. So what was at the bottom? Now, the things at the bottom are very generic. I put extracurricular interests. Some of you might have used some of these extracurricular interests to justify the dynamic part of your CV. Once you've done that, you don't need to repeat it. For instance, if you're an elite sports person, so some of you might be into elite sports, and used your elite sports experience to show leadership, management, and teamwork, you don't need to say it again. You've already used it to highlight something at the top. But if there are any extracurricular interests that show you as a complete person, someone who's well-rounded, you can add it there, and it reflects really well. References, I mean, nowadays you don't have to write your references in full, the details of your references in full. You could write that, it will be available on request, but it's important to ensure your referees are aware of a potential reference coming to them for you before you submit your CV for any job. And make sure you check and confirm the contact details so they don't have difficulties contacting your referees. Now, thank you very much. That's the structure of a CV. I'd say a potential CV with all the sort of highlights of the different parts of a CV, how to fill it. Like, there's a continuous process. Once you've written the CV, it's often important to show somebody, to just kind of have a look, have a neutral person just critique it, make sure the grammar is okay, and reflect the CV appropriately towards what you want it to show. Thank you very much, and I'll take any questions.
Yeah, Dr. Yusuff, there has been quite a few questions on chat, so maybe I'll just read them to you, and
Okay.
so that everyone knows which one we're going through. So something more logistical is people, we're recording this, so you're happy to share that, but some people want to know if they can have the slides as well. Is that something you're willing to share?
Yes, that's fine. I can do that.
Okay, so that's the logistical one. Okay, now we have a bit more about the resume and CV stuff.
Yeah.
So someone's asking basically like, you know, do the GCSEs and A levels really matter for the CV in the long run? Is that something you care to put in to try to see if it's relevant? Like if you're applying for psychiatry, would you want to put psychology A levels down?
That's a very good question. Now, I have a principle that if it's relevant, it can't be too far back. There's nothing like too far back if it's relevant, if it's related. The advantage of showing somebody that you've done GCS, at GCS you did law or psychology, when you're thinking of doing psychiatry, it shows that you've had the desire to do that specialty a long time ago. That reflects someone who is well grounded in the specialty, who's been taking the time to work their way through different things that will show them in a good light in that specialty and also improve their understanding of that specialty. So actually, it's not irrelevant, it's important. But like when I mentioned not putting your GCSEs, it's just putting your GCSEs because you got straight A's. But if there's a GCSE in law and psychology, I want to do psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, then yeah, put it in. It would show it in good light. You might want to show it in a different way that kind of highlights it really well. For instance, you could put it under qualifications. You could do that, but you could put it elsewhere to kind of show that you've had a desire to do the specialty for a long time.
Okay, great, thanks. So you talked about leadership at one point, you know, such as the quote that you got. So someone's asking, do these apply to before med school as well?
Yes, so I would say that this is a good point actually. Because a lot of you think things I've done before med school don't count. It does count. So, but it just can't be anything and everything. It has to be relatable. It has to be important. For instance, I'll give you a very good example. We've just looked at a person specs that says that you have to have strong leadership skills. And before you came into medical school, I'll give an example for me, for instance. We have a community group, because I've always said I want to be a doctor, I want to be a doctor. We have a community group in Kent where we go into the houses of people who are old and need help, and some of them live alone, and their interface with healthcare is such that they don't understand what they're being told, and they're not able to relate. There's also cultural issues associated, relate their problems properly to get help. So we kind of serve as an interface to help translate and relate. And at one point, the person who was leading that group fell ill and couldn't lead it. And I had to take on the mantra of leading the group, although for a short period of time. But that's a really important job to do. Had a lot of responsibility, organization, teamwork, coordination, and it's a strong leadership skill. It happened before medical school, but even down the line, it's an important, very important event in my life that showed my leadership skills and my ability to lead people, but something that was really, really important to the people involved. So I don't think it's too far away. But something that it has to be relatable. It has to be relatable to those dynamic part of the CV that is important, and you have to highlight it there.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, many questions that I love. It's been adding up. So someone asked a very specific question. What does it exactly mean by knowing your specialty? So I'm guessing earlier you mentioned about maybe people who early on in their medical careers know what they want to get into. Mm. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, exactly. So, there's some of you in this group who on the day one of medical school knew they want to be emergency physicians or a cardiothoracic surgeon or a respiratory physician, and you start to walk towards it. And some of you that don't know. But some of you along the line will start to appreciate and start to understand yourselves better and know where you want to end up. Once you start to do that, you need to start having a relationship with the specialty, start understanding it. first thing, go on the internet. Or you're in a rotation, you think you kind of like the idea of anesthetics, for instance. And you decide to do an SSC in aesthetics and say, look, I want to understand a specialty. That's part of understanding, grounding yourself in a specialty. Go on the Royal College of Anesthetists website, read about becoming an anesthetist, speak to people. And that's how you kind of develop a relationship and develop an understanding. And sometimes actually that's a really good process in the sense that you think you like a specialty, by the time you understand, you realize, actually, I'm not really that interested in that, and you change your mind. That's a very valid process to go through, but it's important. It helps you to not make the wrong choices. And that's what I mean by understanding the specialty. So don't decide, okay, I've decided I want to do cardiology and I'm going to wait until I finish core training. No, that's not the way. You have to kind of start the process now.
Thank you. Yeah, I think earlier you mentioned about intercalation, and you specifically pointed out, okay, it's not just FY programs for points, especially since I'm guessing you know about what's happening with the UK FPO situation. Yeah. So some of the students here are going to be impacted by that. Not my year, but the younger ones are. So someone's asking, what, from your personal opinion, like pros and cons, because I guess a lot of them are really thinking about whether they should or not.
So pros and cons. So I think the main con, which I don't see as a con, but some of you might see as it lengthens your program, as a main con, I think. As long as your intercalation is done for the right reasons, in a subject you're interested in, and you, apart from having an interest, you also kind of have the right attitude towards the intercalation. That is that you're going to kind of use it as a personal development tool, because that's one of the bigger aims of it. So if you intercalate, you have a unique opportunity to learn and develop skills you wouldn't have learned and you have time to learn and develop throughout medical school. That starts to set you apart, starts to make you benchmark above the average. So that's one big importance of an intercalated degree. Now, in terms of how you use it, so I don't think, in one basic principle, no knowledge is lost. So don't say it as a waste of time or loss of knowledge. It's important. It would help you, but it would only go to waste if you don't use it. Now, it might not be immediately relevant going into foundation, but like I said, if you just look at the present specs that I've showed you, it starts to become very relevant if you want to go ahead into other specialties in medicine, academics, surgery, especially very competitive specialties. It would come into your favor, especially now we have intercalated masters, which I think is a great program, because it's still classed as a master's degree, and it would give you the relevant points. And the other thing is that some, MRes programs have a huge research component in them that by the time you come out of it, you have skills that you couldn't have learned without having that opportunity. So I think it's not a waste of time. It will come in useful as long as you're interested in it.
Okay, great. I like these questions here, very specific to the CV, and those are questions I might have as well. Someone's asking, what's your opinion on the headshots on a CV?
So that is an interesting question. So I'm a stifler for objectivity. I would take away anything that might give a hint to subjectivity. So I would take it out. That's my opinion. Some people, I have a lot of friends in finance industry, and it's quite cutthroat there. And if you think having a headshot will help you, some people put it, but I think medicine is the assessment process in medicine is a very objective process, and I think it doesn't help you. It doesn't make it favorable or unfavorable. At interview, if you make it to interviews, they'll still see you anyway. So I personally think it's not necessary.
Yeah, because some of the questions here, I guess, are a bit more like logistical in terms of how you actually write it, how the layout is like. So I don't know if you have like a sample resume you think is good, and maybe alongside the slides we can share with them might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to do that, and there's a temptation. Whereas the problem with doing that is that you create a CV that people will just take as a template and copy. I actually want you guys to think and develop your own CVs. I mean, I've seen some really beautiful CVs where people, you can see people have put a lot of thought into it and just needs tweaking. What I can advise is that, you know, write your CV the way you think it is, right? And have someone look at it and help you tweak it. Like I said, it's a cyclical process. You gather the information, you write it, but you review and rewrite it again. And I don't want the CV process to start and stop as an event. I want it to be a process. I write my CV every year. Before my appraisal, I've got to write my CV again. I've got to look at it again and make sure it's relevant. I've added in new things, I've taken things out. And you've also reviewed and revised over and over again. I can provide a sample, but it would be the bullet points of the structure and the slides that I've given you, the top, the middle, and the bottom. And that's pretty much what it is. And then you can spruce up and make it dynamic as much as you want. There are other tools online where people try to suggest how to write your CV, and you could follow that didactically if you want, but you need to add a personal touch as well, because that just shows you as in a better light. I think when I send the slides across, you can actually look at, because the three structures, the top, middle, and bottom, are on the slides, and maybe that might help for people to write the CVs.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, because a lot of people, if they have a template or the Word document, they'll just end up using the same thing and everyone looks the same. Exactly. So that's a very good point. You don't want that to happen. No. Okay. Quite a few more questions. Are you in a rush for time?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay for time. Yeah.
So a few questions here are related to, because you talked a bit about research and audits and publications. So some of them are just wondering about, what's the best way for them to go for it, and what kind is best, like quantitative versus data, where should they do it,
That's a very good question, actually. So in terms of what kind of research, so obviously as medical students, you wouldn't be able to lead and run your own research project. So this is where having a specialty mentor helps. So first of all, if, for instance, you're rotating through a block, there's really just specialty you want to do, that's a good opportunity to latch on, highlight that I'm actually really interested in research and form those relationships. The good thing about research nowadays is that you don't physically have to be in that unit for a year to do research in that unit. You don't. You can be anywhere in the world and publish a paper. I did a fellowship in Papworth in 2013, but I published a paper from there in 2016 after I'd gone back to my base hospital. So it is doable, as long as you have the relationship and a contact with a team who you're going to be doing the research with. So it's all about developing. I think the first thing is develop the relationship with a team. And then second thing is express an interest that I'd like to do a research project. There are always things going on. And research has so many facets. Facets starts from gathering the data, analyzing the data. Some of you are very good at data science. So, if you want to be involved in data analysis, or you want to learn about it, be involved and actually learn about the statistics and analysis of data, or you want to go into the writing side, publication, writing the publication, writing it up and presenting it to the journal. The phases start from one point and finish at another point, and your involvement could involve any of that. So the first thing is have a relationship with a specialty, make your interests known, and then you'll be presented with opportunities. I've got always to do. I'm like, oh, very good. I've got this one project, and and that's the way to start.
Great, thanks. So earlier we talked about some people knowing what they want to do. So some people do know what they want to do originally, but then they pivot. So how does that make your CV look? The fact that you pivoted, like everything's focused on urology at one point, and then now you want to apply for psychiatry. So someone's asking whether that looks bad.
No, it doesn't. No, I'll be honest with you, it absolutely doesn't. And I've been through a recruitment process recently where an individual changed their mind from one specialty to the other, right angles to each other. The good thing about medical training, I mean, when I talk to you guys, talk about how medical training is spiral learning. You get exposed to same information over and over again to become an expert. Initially, it's generic, then becomes specialty specific. But the skills and attributes you learn, irrespective of specialty, are applicable to different specialties. As long as at the point where you realize I don't want to be a urologist anymore, you relevantly start to make yourself, competitive in the new specialty. But, you can smartly draw on experiences and things you've done whilst trying to be a urologist to kind of qualify being a psychiatrist. You might think that's impossible. For example, if you've done research and presentations, you can use that really well to kind of highlight that you can demonstrate you've got certain qualities that are very applicable to psychiatry. And actually, it makes your interview very interesting because if you've done it really well, once you've towards the end of the interview, one of the exam nowadays is very structured, but if you have time, they might ask you cheekily, why this switch? And then it makes an interesting conversation, but it doesn't come against you at all, as long as you follow the right process.
Yeah, I would think that a lot of people have that switch, right? Most people, I'm sure, they think
Yeah,
they just think they are at one point.
And unfairly for you guys, you have to decide so early nowadays. In my day, you could take some time. I mean, even I thought I was rushed, but looking at how you guys are at the moment, you guys are actually really rushed. But and so there's an anticipation that some of you would need to make that change. As long as you follow the process, like I said, you can pretty much draw on what you've put together. And I think like urology psychiatry is an exception, but often it's usually from something, two specialties that are quite related to each other. So it's actually quite easy to transform your CV.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm combining kind of two questions here. So, we talked about intercalation. How about, for foundation years, when you're thinking of furthering your education, maybe like a PG cert or an MSc or something, what's your understanding of that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And that is, so basically you could look at it, for instance, if you've made a personal decision not to intercalate, or you hadn't made up your mind during medical school to go into specialty, and then at foundation, you realize actually what I'd like to do is probably an academic program. It would have to be in your own time. Do a master's degree. And I know a lot of people who have done that, done it part-time. It might take you a bit longer to do, but it's doable. You'd have to be pretty organized to kind of get it all through and get it done. So yeah, I think it is a reasonable shout. Once you've identified that it's something that you would stand in good stead for what you want to do, you could do it in foundation. It just makes that period a lot more busier for you.
Okay, I think we're kind of done, but kind of one last question, which is a quick one.
Okay.
You showed one example, I think was maybe the IMT one or one of the other PDFs, where like an intercalated degree or another degree is kind of like brownie points. Does it actually correlate to like 1 point, or is there a very straightforward way of viewing it?
Yeah, it depends on the program. Like I'll tell you the one I know of. So it depends on the program. This is usually well highlighted for the program. For academic clinical lectureship and intensive care, which is what I assess often. If you have an integrated degree and you've passed it, you've been awarded, you get a point, right? That's an integrated BSc. If you're an integrated master's, you get a couple of points. If you have a distinction in any of them, it gives an extra point. So you can see how the points rack up. And actually, the extra degree section for the academics is a distinct section. It's on its own. Its marks are taken separately and added to the whole. So it's actually not, it's quite important. They apply to various competitive specialties. They're weighted differently. Some people would, for instance, if you get a third class in a degree, they would say you don't get a point for it, but some people would just give you a point. Whereas if you get a second class upper or first class, you get extra points, and masters, you get extra points, and PhD, you get even more points. Also, with research, publication is the other one that is assessed quite differently. For some jobs, you'll be assessed if you're the first author in the publication, you might be given more points for that than if you're just a co-author. And then if you have multiple publications where you're the first author, then you might get more points than if you have multiple publications where you're the co-author. So, those are the differences.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's. Oh wait, someone just added one more if you don't mind. Where do you go find out exactly how many points and all of that?
So that's the thing. So when the job is advertised, some jobs, they show you a marking scheme, and actually in the spirit of objectivity today, everything has to be very objective. It's quite clear what you get for in each category. So it's part of understanding and grounding yourself in the specialty. You would have seen previous applications or asked people who have applied through before, or your specialty mentor would be able to highlight, oh yeah, you stand a better chance if you do X, Y, and Z. But yeah, multiple sources of information. Some specialties are not as clear cut with it, I must admit, than others. So if it's not freely available through the job advert, you would get to know this by, your interactions with people who work in the specialty.
Okay, I think. Oh, well, sorry. There's just so many. People just keep adding. I think we have to keep this to the last one. We can't keep Dr. Yusuff anyway. Okay, by awards and distinctions, can these be done? Can this be? Oh, okay. So basically, someone's just asking. Like when you talk about awards and distinctions, what do they actually refer to? Are we talking about like performance in academia, or are we talking about other things like exams or SSCs or electives?
So you can make it what you want to be. So primarily it's academic awards and distinctions from your end of year exams, or it could be from intercalation SSC, or from any assessments you've done and you received an award or a distinction in that. But you could also put other awards and distinctions that are non-academic but are relatable to a dynamic part of your field. I mentioned something about an elite athlete who, if you're an elite athlete, for instance, and you've won a major award in a competition, one, it shows your in the non-clinical side of you've demonstrated excellence, which is relatable, because if you're able to show excellence in such a complex non-clinical environment, you probably have the attributes to show it in a clinical environment, if you get my point. So even if you have relatable, the key thing there, it has to be relatable to what you want to do. It just can't be anything. I got an award for attending a dog show or something like that. It has to be something relatable and that is connected to the specialty you want to do. But I think for most of you, it's probably going to be academic.
Okay, I think we're finally done with the questions. Thanks so much, Dr. Yusuff. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to get the slides from you, and then I'll share it with them. So Dr. Yusuff, I don't think you really know yet, but at Leicester Medical School, and we started using a platform called Anastomos. I actually created it, and we're hosting all our events on it. So some other medical students have also started joining, which is why we have some non-Leicester medics on here.
Okay.
And yeah, it's becoming a very vibrant community. Every week there are a couple hundred more students are joining. So so it's great because it's full of medics, and we might also I'm in talks with Mr. McCarthy as well, Mark McCarthy, about bringing in the UHL doctors in as well. So putting like UHL events in as well. So I'm thinking maybe I'll put your slides on there because you can form groups and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would like you to join the community as well. So I'm gonna send
definitely. I'll try and join. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Very good.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. We're gonna have other events related to this. Obviously, there are a lot of lectures, academic ones, but if you have any suggestions of what you'd like for your career, such as this from Dr. Yusuff, please let us know. Recording and slides will be on Anastomos.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Yusuff. Have a good night. Appreciate it.
Good night.